And welcome back, Hornets. And here we are again for another rousing round of Ready Workbook Fun. Yay! So if you do not have out your workbook, now is the good time. And to get it out, pause me, whatever you need to do. You will also need out your pen, your pencil, your highlighter, whatever it is that you need. And as always, if I write it in red, you need to write it down in your workbook. Also, I'm adding a little twist to this and putting in some stuff in blue. And also, so if it's in red or blue, that means you also need to write it in too. Yay, I got to rhyme all the time. I'm going to stop. Okay, poetry was units ago. Now, so on page 210, you're going to notice that we're going to start our part two when we're dealing with historical fiction and historical accounts. So, and if you look back to page 209, you will also remember that we are dealing with compare and contrasting genres. And keep in mind, when I say comparing, I mean how something is alike. When I say contrasting, I mean how something is different. And when I say genres, I'm talking about not just simply fiction and nonfiction anymore. I'm talking about all the genres of literature, and those include fiction, which means it's fake, nonfiction, which means it is real, folklore, which deals in oral tradition and stories that have been passed down for generations, and underneath that's mythology, fables, parables, folk tales, tall tales, legends, fairy tales. I think I'm missing one or two more, but anything that's passed down from one generation to the next. Our fourth genre is poetry, and we've dealt with some poetry. We've read some lyrics, we've read ballads, we've read odes, we've read sonnets. We have also read some concrete and some structural. So we've read some poetry, and we've read free verse versus rhyme. And then our last genre is drama, which is anything that is meant to be acted out. Now, remember, drama has stage directions and it's got characters and it has the dialogue written with the characters about to say something. And anything that's being acted out can be a skit, it can be a play, it can be theater, it can be a TV show, it can be a movie. So just keep that in mind that it's meant to be acted out. Radio, talk shows, podcasts, YouTube, TikTok, anytime someone has written a script of what they're supposed to say, that is dealing with the drama. Now, review over. So the next thing that we're going to notice is our instructions tell us to read the historical account about Lewis and Clark. Now notice I have this underlined in blue. I want to make sure you understand that I'm going to be trying to deal with nonfiction, informational texts, these historical accounts in blue to mark the difference between so we can contrast them a little bit better so you can really see how one is different than the other. Okay, now we're going to read a historical account about the Lewis and Clark expedition. And this really happened. This is a true story, and we're going to get into it in just a minute because a historical account means it happened in history. I'm getting that primary source. There's probably a journal or a book or a diary somewhere where these people were writing down everything they were doing as they were crossing the country from the East Coast to the West Coast. And we probably have those. I could probably go in the library and look them up, which means they're a primary source. Right? And when you take a whole bunch of primary sources and put them together, you could end up with a big overall source for an encyclopedia, for, I would say Wikipedia, but you can put whatever you want to in there so it's not a real source. So scroll over to the bottom and click on one of the links that make Wikipedia a real thing. Now, keep in mind, when we talk about historical accounts, there we go. This means a couple of things. A historical account means it is nonfiction. It is informational text, which means its purpose 99.9 times out of 10 is to inform the reader about real people, places, and events. It's going to use historical documents and those primary sources. Okay? So the next thing we're going to do, and once again, just a reminder, if I get too fast and I go ahead of you, you can pause me and you can keep up. If it's in red or if it's in blue, you got to write it down. So our next step is to, yes, good job. It's to box the title. And our title is Journey to the Pacific. Notice it said Pacific, not specific, not Pacific, Pacific by Rita Hay. And we have how many paragraphs? Count them. And that would be a number 1 and then a number 2. That is correct. Yay. So now we're going to read our story. Y'all ready? I'm going to switch to the next page. So as I read, you might want to take note of Like when we read fiction, we look for setting, characters, and conflict. Same thing happens when I'm reading nonfiction. I'm still looking for people instead of characters. I'm looking for real places instead of a setting. And I'm still looking for events instead of conflict. So you want to make sure we're still looking for those things. So if you see, you might want to circle people or an underline settings. It's not settings. If you want to circle people and underline our actual places, put a star by big events. All that stuff still applies. Okay. All right. So, Journey to the Pacific by Rita Hay. In 1804, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark led the first U.S. expedition to the Pacific coast of North America, sent by President Thomas Jefferson to chart a route through unexplored regions of the country. The team of explorers recorded the wide variety of plants, animals, and geography they saw in the wilderness. The expedition journeyed along rivers, over mountains, and through valleys for over a year, encountering hostile tribes, inclement weather, and challenging terrain. On November 7th, 1805, the Corp's Destiny thought they had finally found the Pacific Ocean, but they were mistaken. The wide expanse of open water turned out to be the estuary, or mouth of the Columbia River. With the help of native guides and determined companions, however, the team finally succeeded. The expedition reached the Pacific Ocean on November 15th, 1805. A long, hard winter and return journey lay before them, but the first half of their mission had been accomplished. Okay, so when we're looking, remember, when we're going to look at this big question down here, what characteristics of historical accounts are present in this passage? And this is my hint to you. We're looking for historical figures, real places and real times, and actual events here. So what do you see? We're going to go through and underline, or you can highlight if that's what you're more comfortable with, the actual historical things. So what's the first one you see? I'm going to give you a second to go through. All right, so the first one, I know one of those things when I'm looking for historical accounts, I'm looking to see if we got famous people. Do we have any famous, well-known historical figures that are going to show up? And we do. All right, it even gives me a time in a year that these famous, well-known people are about to do their thing. And it's that in 1804, I've got Lewis right here and Clark. And my big event that they're about to do is to lead the first U.S. expedition to the Pacific coast. So that's going from the East Coast over there in Washington and Maryland and New York, all the way out to Cali, to go into California, okay, or Oregon or Washington. That's where they're going, okay? And keep in mind, it says the first, which means nobody's ever, as far as they know back then, made it from one coast to the other coast. All right. I also see another famous name, and it's, good job, it is President Thomas Jefferson, and he's the one who's in charge. He sends them. We can actually probably go look this up and find documentation from the president's house, from the Capitol, the White House, to tell us that we're sending them. I don't know if we were in the White House by then. Were we in the White? Never mind. Okay. So now, with that being said, we're going to make sure we underline the fact that we were sent all the way to chart through that unexplored regions of the country. All right. And then I'm going to jump down to paragraph 2, where I get another date. Miss Murray likes dates because dates tell me that it's giving me something I can look at. I can go Google. I can go to the encyclopedia. I can go research. I can go try to find information on this date. Okay. So on November 7th, 1805, the Corps of Discovery, which is what they called themselves, that was our nickname for each other, thought they had finally found the ocean, but they were mistaken. SpaghettiOs. Well, so if they were mistaken, then they didn't find it. Instead, they found the estuary, or which is, if you use your context clue, or mouth of the Columbia River. Okay. And I mean, and it's pretty, and it's large. Think about the estuary of the Mississippi down there in the mouth of the Mississippi River down there in New Orleans. It's pretty large, and think about all of the ships and stuff coming in and out. Then I have one other thing I want to make sure that I have. Say they were mistaken, because that really wasn't what it is. And then I have another date. My other date tells me that 10 days, well, roughly not 10 days, 8 days later, they were able to finally get to the Pacific Ocean. Okay. That's all stuff. That's the Pacific Ocean. I get dates. I get where they were going, who sent them, and who went with them. I'm not getting a lot of who said, she said, they did, they saw. No, I'm getting very vague overviews of what happened because were we there? No, we weren't. And we're trying to keep this as historically accurate as possible and not turn it into historical fiction. So, with that being said, we go to the chart at the bottom and we're going to take these things that we've underlined and we're going to insert them in our chart. Okay. So, let's go through and read our instructions real quick. So, explore how to answer this question. What characteristics of historical accounts are present in the passage? This historical account of Lewis and Clark's expedition includes many details about their journey. Underline examples of facts, people, and places that present historical information. Oh, we already did that. Snap. It's like I knew what we were going to be doing. And then we're going to fill in. Then we're going to fill in the first column of the chart below with facts from the account. And then tomorrow we'll read the fictional story for part 3, and then we'll do the fictional details on the next page. Okay. So right now, the only thing we're going to look for is the stuff in historical facts. And it's the things we just underlined. And as you see, I already messed up. And here we go. We end up with Meriwether Lewis and William Clark began an expedition to the Pacific coast in 1804. We have also Thomas Jefferson asked them to make his journey. The expedition was called the Corpse Discovery. They mistook the estuary of the Columbia River for the Pacific Ocean on November 7th, 1805, and then they found the Pacific on November 15th, 1805. So I've got my real people, I've got my real dates, and I've got what they were really doing. This is history. There is no room for making up dialogue or making up things or making up characters right here because I'm just getting the facts about what happened on that day. Okay? So, and that is the it for part 2 today. So tomorrow we will work on part 3. And once we finish part 3, we'll come back, or once we finish reading part 3, we're going to come back and fill in the fictional details. But we will do that tomorrow and then answer the question that goes along with it. As always, Hornets, if y'all have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. Bye, y'all.